GGG have just released the Reliquarian Ascendancy for the Scion. That's the second Scion Ascendancy alongside the Ascendant. And we're basically getting all of the unique item reveals for each of the nodes here in this reveal. And we know that this Ascendancy is going to change each league. So each of these nodes, we're not actually sure if all of the nodes will change, but we know that some of them at least will be changing each league. So I'm just going to go through them in this video and give my first impressions on this class. So one thing to note immediately about the Reliquarian is that it's taking a lot of inspiration from the Scavenger from the Freesia event, and that's in regards to the layout of this Ascendancy. Basically, each of these points is one of your Ascension points. Obviously, you get 8 in total, which means the first lab there, you're only going to be getting 2 passive points. You don't get any kind of node from your first lab. So in terms of actually ascending, this is going to feel pretty bad. It's going to feel, like the Scion, basically. And then you're actually going to be getting your first actual notable in the second lab, and then you'll also be getting a passive point as well. Then you basically have to choose which way you go, because you can see there's 2 points here and 1 point here, which means that you can't take a node from the top and a node from the bottom. You must choose to go in one direction or the other, and then you spend your last 2 points on one of these nodes over here. So let's take a look at what we've got on the Reliquarian. So first of all, we have Veruso's Ambition up here, which is a pair of boots. And this is the Ravenous skill right here. Ravenous is a very weird ability. You can see this other line right here. Enemies display their monster category. The way how Ravenous works is whenever there's a corpse on the ground, it basically will have a monster category. After you've killed that monster, you can consume the corpse, and then you'll gain bonuses against that particular type of monster category. So for example, it could be Eldritch, or it could be Construct, or it could be, human or undead. And you basically gain bonuses against that particular category of monster. You're going to gain 15% more damage against those monsters, and you take 15% less from them. This is not really that strong of a buff overall, because obviously a lot of zones in Path of Exile, they've got all kinds of different monsters. So this is usually not that good. And the other bonuses there are quite nice, some chaos resistance and some movement speed, but overall I think this is one of the weaker options on the first set of nodes. We have more of Conquest there, which is quite nice, unaffected by poison, and 40% of all damage taken recoups its life, so that's not too bad. Again, one of the weaker ones, I think, on this first set. There's also Victario's Influence. This one was already teased. I will say, though, this one is quite interesting. It has 15% increased reservation efficiency of skills. Notice that is not just mana reservation efficiency, that is also including life reservation efficiency, and that also has +2 to the level of all aura skill gems. Now, when I look at this node here, one thing that immediately comes to mind is the kind of lightning stacker builds that use March of the Legion. So, for example, making use of Vile Smite there, and making use of Wrath as well, to be able to get a lot of extra lightning damage. You can scale up those gems to provide more flat damage, and obviously the extra reservation efficiency is going to play in there as well, allowing you to actually reserve more auras. So that one does seem pretty good. And then we have what I think is probably the best node on this first selection, which is the Brass Dome. It does have a few downsides though, so this is going to be for particular build archetypes. It's not like a universally strong thing. The Brass Dome obviously is already a body armor that kind of has this push and pull mechanic. This one is +3% to all maximum elemental resistances, and then Strength provides no bonus to maximum life, which is already on the Brass Dome, and it removes all energy shield, which is a stat that the Brass Dome doesn't actually have. And then we have another stat that the Brass Dome doesn't have. Armor from equipped body armor is doubled. That's the Juggernaut node from, I believe, Unbreakable. And then we have take no extra damage from critical strikes, which is a Brass Dome modifier. So if we head over to the Brass Dome, we can see here, this one has the max res, of course, rolls up to +5. It does already have this bonus, and it has that one as well. And I do think that, for the most part, a lot of these nodes you're going to see on the Reliquarian, in a lot of cases, you kind of want to stack the unique with actually using the unique in your build, because a lot of the downsides are then already covered, so you just kind of get the upside, right? It does mean that sometimes you are overlapping on stats that are not really gaining any extra benefit for having 2 of them. For example, the take no extra damage from critical strikes. That one isn't going to do anything when you get a second copy of it. And obviously, you won't be able to use Energy Shield in this type of build. That's something that you probably wouldn't usually be doing with the Brass Dome anyway. But I think stacking the Brass Dome with this node is going to be quite powerful. That will be 8% to all maximum elemental resistances. And then, of course, the Brass Dome itself has quite a large amount of armor. Not as much as you can get on a crafted body armor, of course, but still quite a respectable amount of armor that then gets scaled by that double body armor modifier. So this one overall pretty good, but you will have to invest a little bit extra into life because, of course, no energy shield and you gain no bonus to life from strength. Now lastly, we have Kiloava's Bluster there, which is 25% chance to avoid elemental ailments, and 40% chance for elemental resistances to count as being 90% against enemy hits. So this is a stat that already exists on the shield, and this one rolls up to 40, so you can stack these together for an effective 80% chance to roll 90% against enemy hits, which is quite good. And then, of course, you have the ailment avoidance there as well. If you get a maximum roll on that too, on the shield, and stack those together, you would have 50% towards ailment immunity. This one, I think, is decent, but I still don't think it really matches the power of the Brass Dome. For me, I think the Brass Dome and Victorious Influence are probably going to be the two most used nodes on this first set of choices. But let's take a look at the next set over here. So this is the lower set, and you'll notice that these kind of have a theme. So these are mostly sort of armors and, you know, helmets, boots, those sort of things. And over here we have things like jewelry items, amulets and stuff like that. And then at the top and the bottom we have mostly weapons. So we have Terminus S tier, which is, you know, Flicker Strike Central, gain a Frenzy Charge on critical strike. There's also 10% movement speed. This one I actually expect to be used quite a lot. This is going to be really popular for Flicker Strike builds. This is going to be a big thing in this patch, I'm sure. That means that you're going to be able to, you know, make use of any weapon that you want. You're still going to have really easy access to generating frenzy charges as long as you're playing a crit build. There's also Widow Hail there, which, of course, you can use that alongside Widow Hail itself for another 250% on a max roll. So that will bring you up to 325% increased bonuses gained from equipped quiver. But one thing I will note about that is it might have some important breakpoints, but if it doesn't have important breakpoints, I don't think this is actually that strong, because, you know, 75% being gained from one of your Ascendancy when you only have 3 nodes to actually take on the Ascendancy. If you compare that to your weapon, which is already granting 250% of that stat, this is actually quite a low amount. But if you're able to hit some of those important breakpoints when it comes to, you know, powerful quiver upgrades, then this is going to be quite strong. There's also Kitava's Feast there, which this does have some pretty cool stats here. You have melee strike skills deal splash damage to surrounding targets. Now, one of the things about splash damage from melee skills is that you usually have to either spec into this on the tree, or you make use of the support gem, which is not very good in any build really, because it's just not a good support gem at all. So most builds end up specking into it or anointing it on the tree. And I will say that this patch is going to be a little bit easier to do that, even if you're on the opposite side of the tree. We do have a new belt base coming into the game called the Cord Belt, and that's going to be able to be anointed, so you can actually have a secondary anoint on your character, just using kind of standard items rather than any kind of blight uniques. So that is going to be quite strong, and that means that this node here overall might not be that great. You do have some recovery for life on kill, and this stat here is kind of underrated. Enemies killed by your hits are destroyed. If you don't have any kind of explode mechanic, this is quite a good defensive node to have, just destroying enemy corpses so they can't then be, you know, detonate, deaded or anything like that. So this is a decent node overall if you can make use of the fact that you can pick up melee strike splash damage here and not get it elsewhere. Then you're able to, you know, spend your points elsewhere on the tree. There's also the Grace of the Goddess there for +2 to Sacred Wisps. I think the support gem gives 2 baseline, so this is quite a good upgrade for wand builds. There's also the Bell Timber Blade there for 80% increased evasion rating while moving, and skills fire 2 additional projectiles if you've used a movement skill recently. Now, that I believe is exactly the same as the Bell Timber Blade. In fact, it is. So 80% increased evasion rating while moving, and skills fire 2 additional projectiles if you've used a movement skill recently. Again, this just makes sense to stack up with this item because it means that you have those bonuses. You can kind of fully commit to a build that makes use of those things. So, you know, you make sure you're always using a movement skill recently. You gain 4 extra projectiles. And then, of course, if you're always on the move, it's very hard for you to actually get hit by incoming hits because you have 160% increased evasion rating. So that is quite a nice combo. And lastly, on this set here, we have Jack the Axe. And Jack the Axe just has grants level 30 Thirst for Blood. Now, Jack the Axe is actually really quite a good unique axe. It has quite good stats, a decent amount of damage. It has damage over time multiplier for bleeding. And when you actually combine it with the fact that this skill here grants you 20% more damage for bleeding, it actually ends up being quite a decent axe, especially before you've kind of ended up crafting your endgame axe. Now, this does reserve some life. This is a 10% life reservation. But notably, this is the level 20 Thirst for Blood. That means that the one that's over here on the Reliquarian, the level 30, is going to be better somehow. We don't know how yet. We have no idea what that's going to be. It might be 30% more damage of bleeding, for example. It could be 25% more, but I suppose this will be a little bit more. And it may also be that you gain a bit more regen there. It could even be that the level 30 version does something else, but I would just expect it to be numerically stronger. So there's potential there for a bleeding build on the Reliquarian. Then we have the set of nodes on the opposite side. So as I mentioned earlier, you must choose one direction to go in. So you can't take a node from the previous set here and also take one from this set. So you must choose. And over on this side, we've got things that are more sort of spell focused. And we have Mystic Refractor there for spells firing 2 additional projectiles. Projectiles cannot continue after colliding with targets. This one is quite notable, so you can't have projectiles chaining or forking or anything like that after they've actually collided with a target and dealt damage. So this is particularly good on skills that don't kind of have any interactions like that. For example, things like Forbidden Right, where, the projectile is just kind of ground targeted anyway. It's just landing on the ground, so you don't really care about that downside. Now, one of the nodes that I really want to highlight here on this particular set is the Burden of Shadows. Now, this is normally a staff. It's a very, very rare staff. It drops from the King in the Mists, and I believe this is like a 1% drop rate or something. It's very rare indeed. And this is obviously a 2-handed staff, which means you cannot make use of Wrathpith Globe. Okay, that is really important because the Burden of Shadows is a life-stacking staff. It has spells deal added chaos damage equal to 15 to 20% of your maximum life. Then it also has, level 1 life tap there, some cast speed, and there's the downside there of losing 500 life per second, something which usually isn't that bad if you're stacking tons of life. Now, the thing is about this staff, as I mentioned, you can't use Wrathpith Globe, which is the main way of scaling damage when you're a life stacker. However, on this Ascendancy, we have a Burden of Shadows node. It is only 5% of your maximum life gained as chaos damage, but I think this is still really, really good because you can combine this with Wrathpith Globe. That means you're going to get a bunch of extra spell crit chance and extra spell damage. So I really think that this is going to be one of the premium choices on the Reliquarian this league in terms of endgame builds. Then we have Sybil's Paw. This is probably the weakest one on this entire set. Gain 20 life per enemy hit with spells and 8% increased spell damage per 5% chance to block attack damage. Not really too much to say about that. I think this is one of the weakest uniques in the game, even after it got changed, and it's just not that good. Then we have Cardigan's Authority. This one is +3 to the maximum number of summon totems, which seems really good, but then you cannot have more than 2 summon totems of the same type. So this item hasn't really been used much at all since it got added to the game, and it's because it's really hard to make use of a build that tries to use, 3 or 4 different totem skills all at once. It's just, we don't really have the support in the game. This isn't PoE 2, we don't have all of those links and things like that. So this is a really hard thing to build around, I think, but perhaps someone will find a way with this node here on the Reliquarian. Then we have Martyr's Teaching. Now this is another one that I'm not really too sure on. So minions' base attack critical strike chance is equal to the critical strike chance of your main hand weapon. The reason I'm not really too sure about this is because Martyr's Teaching is already a really good item. It has a decent crit chance. I think it rolls up to like 10% or something. And then it also has minion gem levels, +2 I believe to minions, and that's a scepter as well. So, you can even hit with it, melee hit and things like that if you want to do things like smite for your minions. But I think the weapon itself is already really good. So I'm not actually sure how good this modifier is as a standalone modifier, but I'm also not really a minion guy, so we'll have to let the minion players decide what they think of that one. Then we have Replica Heartbreaker to round out this set. 60% chance to impale on spell here. Now, if we head over to Replica Heartbreaker, here it is. This one is 20% chance to impale on spell hit. And you could, in theory, stack 2 of these plus that node to have 100% chance to impale on spell hit. Perhaps someone will come up with a build for that this league. It is very, very niche, but it's something that may work. And now we move on to the last set of nodes, which, again, this is kind of more, jewelry and amulets and things like that. So first of all, we have Astral Projector. Nova spells cast at the targeted location instead of around you, and spells have 25% increased area of effect. Now, I do want to point out that this is actually quite interesting because the ring itself has Nova spells have 20% less area of effect. So this is a lot better than the ring, and using this ring usually is kind of annoying unless you're going to make good use of the avoid ailments and things like that. This is not a particularly good ring outside of the Nova spells cast at targeted location instead of around you. So this is actually really quite good. Larger area effect, and you get that bonus that you want from the ring without having to use your ring slot. This one is very strong. Then we have the Burden of Truth. There could be some shenanigans here with kind of swapping around which damage types are taken from Energy Shield and which ones bypass it. I would have to look into that a little bit, but this is 33% of non-chaos damage taken bypasses Energy Shield, and 33% of chaos damage taken does not bypass Energy Shield. And then you also gain 10% of maximum life as extra maximum Energy Shield. That last line there is very, very strong. So this one, quite a strong defensive node. And again, I'd have to look to see if you can do any shenanigans with this, getting those stats up to 100%. There's also Astromentis. This was already teased. I actually thought about this a little bit. 60 attributes is pretty good, but I'm not sure if it's that good. Obviously, on a triple attribute stacker, this is going to be quite strong. But even then, I think the other Ascendancies are probably just kind of better in that regard. Then we have the Warped Timepiece. Now, this one is quite good. Debuffs on you expire 100% faster. We just recently had the buff to Beacon of Madness to make it so these apply a debuff every 2 seconds rather than 1 second. That brought the breakpoints down so that you're able to kind of invest and use these boots at a lower amount of faster debuff expiry rate. And that means that, this is going to be a build on this Ascendancy, this league for sure. There'll definitely be quite a few people making use of that. You can then pick up this node. You don't have to use the actual Warp Timepiece amulet, and you can gain the rest of the, 50 or 55% debuff expiry elsewhere, and that frees up your amulet slot, just like the Astral Projector. That is quite strong. And there's Prospero's Protection, which is armor from equipped shield is doubled, 10% chance to block attack damage, and gain no armor from equipped body armor. Situationally, could be quite good, but it's very, very niche. Again, it's something where you kind of want to make use of a really strong body armor that doesn't have armor. Things like Diadas, for example, come to mind. You could even make use of stuff like Cloak of Flame if you wanted to go really defensive. And then, of course, you go for a very high armor shield. Even something like a Dawnbreaker benefits quite strongly from this. And it does mean, once again, that you don't actually have to use Prospero's Protection, the ring, because, again, that's a ring slot that feels kind of wasted, even though you do get a lot out of it if you invest quite heavily. But defensively, that could be quite strong. And lastly, in this set, we have the Tear of Purity. Grants level 30 Purity of Elements, and Purity of Elements has 100% increased mana reservation efficiency. Now, 100% increased mana reservation efficiency is going to make this reserve about 25% of mana. So 25% of mana for a level 30 Purity of Elements. Purity of Elements is already really nice because it makes you immune to elemental ailments. And at level 30, it will grant you 41% to all elemental resistances. This is definitely one of the stronger ones here on this last set of nodes. So I do expect that one to be picked up quite a bit. But overall, I really, really like this Ascendancy. I really like what they're doing with this Ascendancy with the nodes being swapped out every league. I do think that from a build-making perspective, it can be quite annoying that your build is basically going to live and die for a single league, and then the next league it's basically not playable because a bunch of the nodes have been, swapped around and changed about. But I think it's very exciting for players to just be able to get to a new league and wonder what the new nodes are going to be. So overall, really, really cool design. I love the fact that the Reliquarian is in the game now, and that's basically my first thoughts on it. What do you guys think of this Ascendancy? Let me know by commenting below. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.